Life is not a series of random events. It is structured, layered, and deeply embedded with meaning. Meaning that often eludes us when we are consumed by our own immediate concerns. You are not a mere accident, a floating speck in an indifferent universe. There is an order to existence, a logic to the structure of your life, and whether you recognize it or not, you are part of something much greater than yourself. But here's where things become complicated. You cannot always see that order. You may feel lost, uncertain about the future, or even trapped by your current circumstances. That feeling is not unique to you. It is the universal condition of human beings. We are bound by our limitations, unable to see the full scope of our own existence. And because of this, we often become frustrated. We ask ourselves, why is my life unfolding this way? Why is there so much uncertainty? And perhaps most pressing of all, does my life have any purpose? The answer to that question is not as elusive as it might seem. Your life has a purpose because life itself has a purpose. The world is structured in such a way that meaning emerges when you align yourself with something greater than your own immediate gratification. When you discipline yourself, when you work toward something noble, when you embrace responsibility, you begin to see the shape of that meaning take form. And that is not a coincidence. That is an indication that the path you are walking is not random. It is part of a greater design. But here's the problem. People resist that idea. They resist the notion that their life has a design purpose, because if it does, then that means they are accountable to something beyond themselves. And accountability is terrifying. It means that our choices matter, that what we do has weight, that our actions have consequences beyond what we can immediately perceive. And it is much easier, far more convenient to believe that life is meaningless, that nothing truly matters, that way we can live however we want without concern for whether we are moving in the right direction or not. But the truth remains, whether we acknowledge it or not. You were created with a purpose, and your life is unfolding in a way that is guiding you toward that purpose. That does not mean that everything will be easy. Does not mean that there won't be suffering, obstacles, or moments where you feel completely lost. But it does mean that your struggles are not meaningless. It means that every setback, every hardship, every moment of doubt is part of a larger story in the present, but will one day understand. Think about the times in your life when something didn't go the way you wanted it to. Maybe you didn't get the job you applied for. Maybe your relationship ended unexpectedly. Maybe you faced a loss so deep that it felt like you would never recover. In those moments, it is easy to believe that life is chaotic, that there is no plan, that everything is just an unfortunate roll of the dice. But then time passes. You gain perspective. And suddenly you begin to see that those moments, those painful, confusing moments, were necessary. They shaped you. They led you somewhere new. They forced you to grow in ways you never would have otherwise. And that is the first sign of purpose. That is the first indication that your life is not some meaningless drift through time, but is in fact part of a greater plan. You are being led somewhere, even if you don't fully understand where yet. The mistake that so many people make is in believing that they must have absolute clarity about their future before they can take a step forward. But that is not how life works. You do not get a road map detailing every turn in advance. Instead, you get a compass, one that points in the right direction. That compass is your sense of responsibility, your capacity for discipline, your ability to strive toward something meaningful even when you don't fully understand the path ahead. And that is why surrendering to meaning is so crucial. If you believe that your life has a purpose, then you must act as if that is true. You must carry yourself with the conviction that what you do matters, that your struggles are not for nothing, that even the moments of deep suffering are leading you somewhere, because they are. And that realization, that acceptance of something greater than yourself is what allows you to move forward even in the darkest times. So the question you must ask yourself is this: will you trust that your life has purpose even when you cannot see the full picture? Will you recognize that the events of your life are not arbitrary but are shaping you, refining you, pushing you towards something greater? Or will you give in to nihilism, to the belief that nothing matters and that your suffering is meaningless? That choice is yours. But make no mistake, one path leads to strength, resilience, and purpose. The other leads only to despair. People are impatient by nature. We want answers, we want results, and we want them now. The idea that we might have to wait for something, that we might have to endure uncertainty is deeply unsettling. And so we push, we grasp, we try to force things into existence before their time. But here's the reality. Things unfold according to a timing that is far beyond our control. And that is something we must come to terms with if we are to maintain any sense of stability and sanity in our life. You might be facing a period in your life where everything feels like it's at a standstill. You have worked hard, you have done everything you were supposed to do, and yet the doors remain shut. Or worse, perhaps some of them opened only to close again right when you thought you were making progress. And in moments like that, it is easy to feel discouraged. It is easy to believe that nothing is happening, that nothing is moving, that you are stuck in an endless loop of frustration and stagnation. But you are not stuck. You are being prepared, and there is a difference. Think about the natural world for a moment. Seeds do not sprout the moment they are planted. There is a process, an invisible one at first, where roots take hold beneath the soil. If you were to dig up a seed in the early stages of growth and judge its progress only by what you could see, you would think nothing was happening. But beneath the surface, something vital is occurring. A foundation is being formed. And only when that foundation is strong enough does the seed push through the soil and emerge into the light. Your life works the same way. You are not merely waiting, you are being shaped. Every moment of apparent stillness is an opportunity for something within you to develop. Patience, resilience, wisdom. The waiting period forces you to confront your own limitations, to refine your character, to strip away the unnecessary so that what remains is something solid, something real, something capable of withstanding the weight of what is coming next. And this is crucial to understand, because if you are given something before you are ready for it, you will not be able to hold on to it. A foundation that is too weak will crumble under pressure. A tree with shallow roots will be torn down by the first strong wind. And so when you find yourself in a season of waiting, the question you must ask is not, why is nothing happening, but rather, what am I being prepared for? It is a matter of trust, not passive trust, not the kind that sits idly by and does nothing, but the kind that remains steady, disciplined, and committed even in the face of uncertainty. It is the trust that says, I do not need to control everything because I know that things are moving in ways I cannot yet see. That kind of trust is not weakness, it is strength. It is the ability to withstand doubt, fear, and impatience without allowing them to consume you. But people resist this. We resist waiting because it forces us to face ourselves. It forces us to sit in discomfort without distraction. And that is why so many people give up too soon. They abandon the process before it is complete. They force things before they are ready. They step into roles, relationships, and responsibilities that they are not yet equipped to handle. And then they wonder why everything falls apart. You have to be willing to endure the waiting. You have to be willing to trust that there is a process unfolding, even when you do not fully understand it. And you must recognize that the discomfort you feel is not punishment. It is preparation. The longer you resist this truth, the more suffering you will bring upon yourself. So what do you do in the meantime? You focus on what is within your control. You build discipline. You refine your skills. You strengthen your mind. You prepare yourself for the next stage so that when the door does open, you will be ready to walk through it. Because that moment will come. And when it does, you will either be prepared or you will not. And so the choice is yours. Will you allow the waiting to shape you? Will you trust that the timing of your life is not random, that you are not forgotten, that what seems like delay is actually preparation? Or will you grow impatient, abandon the process, and settle for something lesser simply because you could not bear the discomfort of waiting? The decision you make will determine the course of your life. One path leads to strength, to wisdom, to the kind of resilience that ensures lasting success. The other leads only to frustration, regret, and the endless cycle of forcing things that were never meant to be forced. Choose wisely. Life is full of struggle. It is built into the structure of reality itself. And yet, strangely enough, we tend to act surprised when we encounter difficulties, as if suffering is some sort of unnatural deviation from the way things are supposed to be. But it is not. It is the default condition of life, and it always has been. Now, this is a harsh truth. It is an uncomfortable reality, and many people would prefer to ignore it altogether, hoping instead for a life without hardship, without uncertainty, without setbacks. But that is not how things work. And in fact, it is not how things should work, because struggle, though painful, is not meaningless. It is not simply an unfortunate inconvenience. It is the very thing that prepares you for what comes next. Think about what happens when you lift weight. If you want to grow stronger, you have to push your muscles beyond their current capacity. You must endure discomfort, strain, even pain. And it is precisely that process, the tearing down and rebuilding, that allows you to become stronger than you were before. Without resistance, without struggle, there is no progress. This is as true for your character as it is for your body. So when you encounter difficulties in life, you have a choice. You can see them as an unfair burden, as an excuse to give up, as evidence that you are doomed to fail. Or you can recognize them for what they are, an opportunity to grow, to develop resilience, to prepare yourself for what is coming next. Because what is coming next will demand more from you than you are currently capable of giving. And if you do not allow yourself to be strengthened now, you will not be able to withstand what is ahead. This is why hardship is not your enemy. It is your teacher. And like all good teachers, it is not gentle. It does not coddle you. It does not make things easy. Instead, it pushes you, tests you, forces you to confront your weaknesses so that you have no choice but to overcome them. That is the only way you truly grow. Now, this does not mean that every struggle will immediately make sense. Sometimes you will face suffering that appears random, unfair, even senseless. And in those moments, it is easy to become bitter. It is easy to believe that your suffering has no purpose, that you are merely being tossed around by a chaotic and indifferent universe. But you must resist that temptation. You must resist the urge to see yourself as a victim. Because the moment you do, you surrender your ability to find meaning in your struggles. And when you lose meaning, so what do you do instead? You look for the lesson. You ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me? How can I use this experience to become stronger, wiser, more prepared? Because no experience, no matter how painful, is wasted if you allow it to refine you. And this is where so many people go wrong. They reject struggle. They avoid discomfort at all costs. They want success without effort, reward without sacrifice, growth without pain. But that is not how life works. That is not how anything of value is obtained. Everything meaningful requires effort. Everything lasting requires endurance. Look at history. Look at the people who have achieved great things, who have left behind legacies that continue to shape the world. None of them had an easy path. None of them were spared hardship. On the contrary, they endured tremendous suffering, but instead of allowing it to break them, they allowed it to shape them. They chose to see their struggles as part of their preparation, as necessary steps towards something greater. You must do the same, because whether you realize it or not, you are being prepared. The difficulties you face today are not random obstacles placed in your path for no reason. They are tests. They are opportunities. They are the tools being used to forge you into the person you are meant to become. And if you reject them, if you avoid hardship, if you refuse to face your struggles head on, you will remain weak. You will remain unprepared. And when the time comes for you to step into what is next, you will find that you are incapable of handling it. So the choice is yours. You can either see your struggles as an unjust burden, as something to be avoided at all costs, or you can embrace them as necessary, as meaningful, as an essential part of your transformation. One path leads to bitterness, to weakness, to a life of frustration and unfulfilled potential. The other leads to growth, to resilience, to a future that is built on strength rather than fragility. So ask yourself, which path will you choose? Life is unpredictable. It moves in ways we cannot always anticipate, often taking us down roads we never intended to walk. And yet, we act as if we should always be in control, as if our plans should unfold exactly as we envision them, when they don't. When things fall apart, when circumstances shift, when the future becomes uncertain, we panic, we resist. We become anxious and overwhelmed because we assume that deviation from our expectations must mean failure. But here's the truth. You are not meant to control everything. You cannot see the full picture of your life, no matter how much you might wish you could. And sometimes the very thing that seems like a setback is in reality a redirection, an adjustment in course that is not only necessary but beneficial. Think of the times in your life when something didn't work out the way you hoped. Maybe you lost a job, maybe a relationship ended, maybe an opportunity that seemed perfect slipped through your fingers. At that moment, it felt like a loss, it felt like a failure. But looking back, haven't there been times when those moments led to something better, something you could not have seen at the time? How often has what seemed like an ending actually been a beginning? And yet, despite this pattern, we continue to cling to our expectations. We fight against change. We become rigid, believing that if things don't happen exactly as we planned, they must be going wrong. But rigidity is dangerous. It leaves us vulnerable to being shattered by the inevitable uncertainties of life. If you cannot adapt, if you cannot learn to trust that things may be unfolding in a way that is beyond your current understanding, you will be crushed under the weight of your own resistance. You should learn to hold your plans loosely, understanding that life is not a straight path, but a series of twists and turns, each one leading you somewhere unexpected. That does not mean you should live passively. It does not mean you should sit back and wait for things to happen to you. No, on the contrary, you should strive forward with all the discipline and strength you can muster. But you should also recognize that when doors close, when circumstances shift, when your plans unravel, it is not necessarily a failure. It may be an indication that something else, something greater, is ahead. But to see that, you must be willing to let go. You must be willing to stop clinging so desperately to what was and open yourself up to what could be. And that is not easy. It requires trust. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to endure uncertainty without losing your sense of purpose. This is why so many people struggle. They become so attached to their own expectations that they cannot see beyond them. And when things don't go according to plan, they become bitter. They lose hope. They assume that because things are not working out the way they imagine, nothing is working out at all. But that is a mistake. That is a failure of perspective. Because life is not something you control. It is something you participate in. You are not the sole architect of your destiny. There are forces at work beyond what you can see, shaping you, guiding you, redirecting you when necessary. And if you cannot accept that, you will spend your life fighting against reality itself. That is a battle you will never win. So what is the alternative? The alternative is to trust that even in uncertainty, there is purpose. It is to recognize that your understanding is limited, that what seems like a loss today may be the very thing that leads to something greater tomorrow. It is to accept that life is dynamic, unpredictable, ever-changing, and that this is not a flaw in the system, but an essential part of it. And so when you face uncertainty, when your plans collapse, when you find yourself standing in the wreckage of what you thought your life would be, remember this: you are not lost. You are being redirected. The road you are walking may not look the way you expected, but that does not mean it is the wrong road. It simply means that there is something ahead that you cannot yet see. So move forward. Do not be paralyzed by fear, by disappointment, by the illusion that you must have complete control over your life in order for it to have meaning. Meaning is not found in certainty. It is found in how you respond to the unknown. And so the question remains, will you fight against what you cannot control? Or will you trust that even in uncertainty there is something unfolding that is greater than your immediate understanding? One path leads to bitterness, to frustration, to the endless exhaustion of trying to control the uncontrollable. The other leads to wisdom, to resilience, to the kind of strength that allows you to walk forward even when the path ahead is unclear. The choice is yours, but choose wisely, because how you handle uncertainty will determine not only your future, but the kind of person you become along the way. There is a deep yearning in human beings to know what's next, to have certainty, to feel secure in the knowledge that things will work out, that the future is not some terrifying abyss waiting to swallow us whole. And that desire is understandable. Life is unpredictable. It is full of risks, full of unknowns, full of moments that can change everything in an instant. And so people grasp for control. They seek assurance. They want guarantees. But life does not offer those things, not in the way we would like. And yet, even without those guarantees, there is something within us that seems to sense that we are not wandering aimlessly, that even in the chaos, there is direction. And that is a profound thing, because it suggests that while you may not know exactly what is coming next, you are still moving toward something. Now, here's where people often go wrong. Instead of trusting in the process of growth, of preparation, of refinement, they allow fear to dictate their decisions. They become so desperate for certainty that they settle for things before their time. They force situations that are not ready to unfold. They make choices not out of wisdom, but out of panic. And when you act out of panic, you almost always move in the wrong direction. Think about how this plays out in daily life. Someone is struggling in their career. They feel stuck, uncertain about the future. Instead of focusing on developing their skills, building discipline, and preparing for opportunities that haven't yet arrived, they rush into something, anything, that offers immediate relief. They take a job they hate, or they abandon long-term goals because they cannot tolerate the discomfort of waiting. And so instead of setting themselves up for something meaningful, they trap themselves in a cycle of short-term decisions that lead nowhere. Or take relationships. Someone is afraid of being alone. They don't know what's next. Instead of using that time to develop themselves, to strengthen their character, to become the kind of person who is actually ready for something healthy and lasting, they settle. They rush into relationships that aren't right, all because the idea of uncertainty is too much to bear. And then, when those relationships inevitably collapse, they are left with even more confusion and pain than before. This is what happens when you cannot tolerate the unknown. You make choices that are not in alignment with where you are supposed to be going. You force things instead of preparing for them. And in doing so, you rob yourself of the future that was meant for you. But what if you did something different? What if instead of grasping at control, you accepted that you are not meant to have all the answers right now? What if instead of trying to force the future to reveal itself on your terms, you focused on becoming the kind of person who is ready for what's next whenever it arrives? That would require patience. It would require faith. Not blind faith, not passive faith, but a kind of trust that is backed by action. A trust that says, I may not know what's next, but I will prepare for it anyway, because preparation is the antidote to fear. When you focus on growth, on self-discipline, on developing your abilities, you stop worrying so much about the unknown because you understand that when the time comes, you will be ready. And that is the key. You must be ready, because what's next for you will demand more than you are right now. It will require strength, resilience, wisdom, and if you do not cultivate those things in the waiting, you will not be able to handle what is coming. But many people do not want to hear that. They want shortcuts. They want guarantees. They want to be told that everything will work out no matter what they do. But that is not how reality operates. You cannot expect to step into something great if you are not prepared to handle the weight of it. The future is not something you stumble into blindly. It is something you must build yourself up for. So here is what you must do. Instead of anxiously wondering about the future, use this time to strengthen yourself. Work on your discipline. Sharpen your skills. Build habits that will support you, not sabotage you. Become the kind of person who is ready for responsibility, for opportunity, for the next level of growth, because what is coming next will require all of that and more. And here's something else to consider. Sometimes the reason you do not know what's next is because if you did, you wouldn't believe you were capable of handling it. Sometimes you are being kept in the dark because if you saw the full picture, you would shrink back in fear. And so instead of being given all the answers, you are given just enough to keep moving forward. And that is a good thing, because the process of walking through uncertainty is what strengthens you. It forces you to develop trust. It forces you to grow. And when you do that, when you focus on becoming rather than obsessing over what's ahead, you will find that the right doors open at the right time. Not because you force them to, but because you are finally ready to walk through them. So here is the question you must ask yourself. Are you preparing for what's next, or are you simply worrying about it? One path leads to strength, to clarity, to a future that is built on a solid foundation. The other leads only to stress, to desperation, to choices that weaken you instead of strengthening you. The decision is yours, but whatever you do, do not waste this time, because what's next for you is coming, whether you are ready for it or not. Life presents itself as an unfolding sequence of challenges, opportunities, and unknowns. And within that sequence, there are moments where everything feels uncertain, when you stand at the edge of a decision, a transition, a threshold between what has been and what will be. In those moments, people often feel lost. They become anxious, unsure of what to do next, unsure of whether the choices before them will lead to prosperity or destruction. That uncertainty breeds hesitation, and hesitation breeds stagnation. Now, this reaction is understandable. When faced with the unknown, it is natural to recoil. It is natural to long for certainty, to wish that the path ahead could be illuminated with absolute clarity. But that is not how life works. It never has been. Life does not reveal itself in its entirety before you take the next step. Instead, it demands that you move forward with incomplete knowledge, that you act before you fully understand. And this is where people struggle. They want to know everything before they do anything. They want assurance before they take action. But that is not how progress is made. In fact, it is often in the act of moving forward that clarity emerges. If you wait until you are absolutely certain before taking the next step, you will wait forever. Because certainty is not a prerequisite for action. Action is what creates certainty. Consider the way a person builds competence in any domain. A musician does not wait until they are a master before picking up an instrument. They pick it up as a beginner, stumbling, making mistakes, struggling through the awkwardness of incompetence. And over time, through practice, through action, they become skilled. Their ability grows not because they started as an expert, but because they were willing to act before they were fully capable. The same is true in life. You do not become ready by waiting. You become ready by doing. And this is one of the great paradoxes of existence. You will never feel fully prepared for what is next, but you must step into it anyway. Because if you do not, if you allow fear to keep you stationary, you will remain trapped in a state of unfulfilled potential. Never truly failing, but never truly succeeding either. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means that when you stand at a crossroads, when you are uncertain about the next step, you must resist the temptation to let fear dictate your choices. You must recognize that the discomfort of uncertainty is not a signal to stop, It is a signal to grow. The very fact that you are facing the unknown means that you are on the edge of transformation. And that is not something to run from. That is something to embrace. Now, does this mean you should act recklessly, making decisions without thought or discernment? Of course not. Wisdom and careful consideration are essential. But there is a difference between thoughtful action and perpetual hesitation. Thoughtful action means evaluating your choices, considering your options, and then moving forward despite the fact that you do not have all the answers. Perpetual hesitation, on the other hand, means staying stuck in analysis, never actually taking the leap because you are too afraid of making the wrong choice. And here is something important to understand. You will make wrong choices. You will take steps that, in hindsight, you might wish you had taken differently. But that is part of the process. Failure is not the opposite of progress. It is an integral part of it. Every misstep, every mistake, every decision that does not turn out as you hoped is an opportunity to learn, to adapt, to refine your path. But none of that is possible if you refuse to act at all. This is why those who accomplish great things in life are not necessarily the ones who had the most talent, the most resources, or the most obvious opportunities. They're the ones who were willing to take the next step, even when they were uncertain, even when they were afraid, even when they did not yet fully understand what they were stepping into. And so when you find yourself wondering what's next, when you feel paralyzed by the weight of uncertainty, remember this: you do not need to know the entire path before taking the first step. You do not need to have absolute certainty before moving forward. You need only the willingness to take action, to step into the unknown with the understanding that clarity, growth, and direction will emerge as you go. Because life does not wait for you to be ready. It moves forward with or without your consent. And if you refuse to move with it, you will not remain in a safe and protected space. You will simply be left behind. So ask yourself this: are you waiting for certainty that will never come? Or are you willing to act in the face of uncertainty? One path leads to stagnation, to a life of unrealized potential, to a future filled with regret. The other leads to growth, to opportunity, to the kind of transformation that can only occur when you have the courage to move forward, even when you do not have all the answers. The choice is yours. But whatever you do not let fear keep you from stepping into what is next. Because whether you are ready or not, the future is already unfolding. And the only question that remains is whether you will step into it or let it pass you by. Life is not a series of disconnected events. It is not a random scattering of circumstances thrown together without meaning or purpose. It unfolds according to patterns, according to structure, some of which you can perceive, and some of which remain hidden from you until you have developed the necessary wisdom to see them. And this is crucial to understand. Just because you cannot yet see the full picture does not mean that there is no picture. Just because you do not know exactly what is coming next does not mean that the future is without direction. But here's the problem. Most people do not think in those terms. They do not operate as though life is structured, as though their actions are leading towards something coherent. Instead, they drift. They wander from one moment to the next, from one impulse to the next, never asking themselves where their current habits, choices, and beliefs are actually leading them. And because they are not conscious of the trajectory they are on, they become victims of it. Consider this: if you do not know where you are going, how will you recognize when you have arrived? If you have no vision for your life, no sense of purpose guiding your actions, then every choice you make is fundamentally arbitrary. You might choose a career based on convenience rather than meaning. You might form relationships based on superficial attraction rather than deep compatibility. You might waste years of your life moving in a direction that ultimately leads to regret, because you never asked yourself where that direction was actually taking you. And this is what happens when people ignore the fundamental reality that their lives are always moving towards something. They operate as though they have infinite time to figure things out. as though the future will simply fall into place on its own. But that is not how it works. The person you are becoming is not a matter of chance, it is a matter of choice. And if you are not intentional about the choices you make, then you will become something by accident. But let's take this further. Even if you acknowledge that your life is moving towards something, even if you recognize that your choices are shaping your future, you may still feel uncertain about what that future holds. You may ask yourself, am I on the right path? Am I doing what I am supposed to be doing? How can I know for sure? These are important questions, but they are also dangerous if you allow them to paralyze you, because the truth is, you will never have absolute certainty. You will never be given a detailed roadmap outlining every step of the journey ahead. Instead, what you are given are signs, clues, embedded in your experiences, in your struggles, in your deepest desires that point you in the right direction. But you have to be paying attention. You have to be willing to step back from the chaos of daily life and actually reflect on where you are going. You have to look at the patterns that have emerged in your life, the lessons you keep encountering, the doors that have opened, the opportunities that have come your way, and ask yourself what they are pointing toward. Because life is not silent. It is always speaking to you, always providing feedback, always guiding you toward something. But if you are too distracted, too impatient, too wrapped up in your own fears and insecurities, you will miss it. And this is why clarity about the future is not something that happens to you. It is something you cultivate. It is the result of discipline, of reflection, of paying attention to the world around you and to the deepest truths within yourself. It is what happens when you stop waiting for the perfect opportunity and start preparing for it. When you stop expecting answers to be handed to you and start searching for them. When you stop treating your life as though it is something that happens to you and start recognizing that you have a role to play in shaping what happens next. But here's the challenge. Many people do not want to take that responsibility. They do not want to believe that their choices matter as much as they do. Because if they acknowledge that their decisions are actively shaping their future, then they also have to acknowledge that their failures, their stagnation, their suffering, much of it is self-inflicted, and that is a hard thing to face. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is to live as though your life is not your own, as though you are just a passive participant in a story that someone else is writing. And that is a recipe for despair. Because if you truly believe that your choices do not matter, if you believe that you are simply at the mercy of external forces beyond your control, then there is no reason to strive for anything. There is no reason to grow, no reason to improve, no reason to pursue something meaningful. And when you strip life of meaning, all that remains is suffering. So you have a choice. You can continue to drift through life hoping that the future will somehow reveal itself to you in a way that requires no effort, no risk, no responsibility. Or you can take control of the only thing that has ever truly been within your power, your own actions. Because while you may not know exactly what is coming next, you can make sure that when it arrives, you are ready. You can discipline your mind, strengthen your character, develop the skills and virtues that will allow you to step confidently into whatever the future holds. You can live with the kind of integrity and purpose that ensures that no matter what happens next, you will not be shaken by it. And that is what separates those who thrive from those who simply survive. It is not that they have more knowledge, more certainty, or more luck. It is that they understand that the future is not something they passively receive. It is something they actively prepare for. So ask yourself, are you waiting for life to happen to you, or are you preparing for what's next? Because whether you are ready or not, the next chapter of your life is already being written. The only question that remains is whether you will step into it with confidence, or whether you will look back years from now and realize that you wasted the opportunity to become everything you were meant to be.